In the wake of Concord being shut down completely and PlayStation giving automatic refunds to virtually every customer that bought it, many are now looking at both Fair Games and Marathon, asking one simple question: are they next? It's no secret that live service games have a somewhat paradoxical existence. They make up some of the biggest and most popular games out there, and yet they seem to have become incredibly stigmatized in gaming culture, and for good reason. The graveyard of failed live service games seems to grow every month, and many of them don't seem motivated by creativity or innovation, just studios and publishers chasing trends, hoping to cash in on the live service gold rush before it dries up. So when we think about Marathon specifically, given the state of the game, I previously called for Bungie and Sony to just cancel it. The former director was fired for misconduct, the direction of the game changed to a cast of heroes, which was met with immediate negativity from the community. Then, we heard from Jason Schreier of Bloomberg that the feeling around the game at Bungie was not great, and it reminded him of Kill the Justice League, launching purely because of sunk cost. His account of things lined up perfectly with IGN's reporting about folks at the studio worried it was being rushed out just to ship before leadership leaves in 2026. Then Tom Henderson from Insider Gaming said that the game was so cooked based on everything he had heard. Well, it may have already been canceled based on the latest Destiny 2 news. And if it has, what does that mean for the future of Destiny? And what about all the work and all the gameplay that was developed? Also, what does it mean for Bungie long term? A brand new report seems to indicate that Sony has really cracked down on Bungie, demanding better discipline and results. Now, every weekday here on Reforge Gaming, I tell you what I think about a gaming topic, and then we go to a live stream where I want to hear what you think. So if you like this content, hit like and subscribe. If you've been following or playing Destiny for any length of time, you are probably aware of the idea that the only thing that will kill Destiny is Destiny. The audience always seemed to rally back and keep things going, regardless of how bad it got. Obviously, everybody's confidence in Destiny's future started to waver when they admitted interest was falling, which led to them missing sales targets by such a large amount that they had to do layoffs. And this wavering confidence continued when they did another round of layoffs, and the current CEO said it was due to stretching the talent too thin and driving the company into the red. All of this happened on the heels of what many saw the beginning as the end for Destiny 2. Bungie announced that they would be moving to a new format with episodes instead of seasons, with no longer doing those annual expansions. The impression at the time was that this was the start of Destiny 2 going into more of a coast mode. Most of the theories centered around the idea that more and more people would be moved off of Destiny 2 to work on either Marathon or Destiny 3. But we learned recently that Destiny 3 was never part of the plan. Instead, they had been working on spin-off Destiny projects like Codename Payback, which was allegedly a third-person game set in the Destiny universe that would be more like an open-world adventure game with monsters, cooperative play, and puzzles. There was also apparently a spin-off PvP game, as well as other small incubation projects and ideas. Well, all of those projects were either completely canned or halted, leading to major names like Luke Smith and Mark Noseworthy to leave the company. It was understood that with all of the major shifts and canceled projects, they would have nothing to work on. Well, enter stage left, the newly unveiled Frontiers plan for Destiny 2. And it includes 2 annual expansions. And when you hear how they are described, it sounds like they have been doing some pretty major shakeups. Games Radar said the following: these new medium-sized expansions will depart from the one-shot campaign structure we've been using essentially unchanged since Shadowkeep. It sounds like Bungie is kicking around some pretty out-there ideas, including, quote, exploration experiences similar to the Dreaming City or Metroidvanias, and more unusual formats like roguelikes or survival shooters. To me, that sounds like those spin-off incubation projects have been repurposed for these Destiny 2 expansions. It felt like Bungie was trying to use the Destiny IP to fuel these spin-off games with different themes and different mechanics. Hearing that these medium-sized expansions will have these out-there ideas like roguelikes and survival shooters, well, I would put money on the table and bet that Destiny 2 is about to inherit a lot of those smaller projects, and tuck away the survival shooters thing just for now. This would support the idea that PlayStation has pushed for them to refocus their efforts on the game that actually makes them money instead of spreading the talent so thin. And according to a former Bungie lawyer, Bungie needed Sony to step in. Don McGowan posted on LinkedIn after the recent update about Destiny's future plans were published, and he seems to agree that internally, PlayStation has pushed for this. He said the following: "Much though it pains me to say this, it appears that Sony's inflicting some discipline on my former colleagues, and it may have forced them to fix things that were wrong with their game. To be clear, I'm not talking about the layoffs, I'm talking about forcing them to get their heads out of their butts and focus on things like implementing a method of new player acquisition, not just doing fan service for the fans in the Bungie C-suite, and running the game like a business." Now, coming from somebody who was in the room when the Sony acquisition was being considered, I think he's a reliable authority on the subject. More than that, he went on to indicate that many at Bungie foolishly thought that PlayStation would be completely hands-off. And maybe they would have been if things continued in a healthy way. But given the losses and the layoffs, I have little doubt that Sony has stepped in. But his second paragraph makes it clear the changes recently announced by Bungie are how you should run a franchise. He said the following: "This is the future I thought the company should embrace after the Sony acquisition, a studio, not an independent company. But there were a lot of egos for whom it was important to pretend that nothing would change. I remember sitting there during a deal saying, do you think Sony describes this as them getting to pay $3.6 billion for the right to have no input into what Bungie does? That was exactly what a lot of people thought. I guess they've been given cause to understand that that's not how things work. Good. The changes described in this article are the things you do to run a franchise, not to keep making the game you and your friends have mastered or to chase trends." Now, that last part really makes me think about Marathon. So, in light of these smaller expansions, including things that, like a survival shooter, and a very clear shift in bandwidth and manpower being refocused on Destiny, where does this leave Marathon? If my theory is correct and the spin-off projects have been folded into the Destiny 2 pipeline, the most logical question to ask is, why not Marathon? Especially given the remark about roguelikes and survival shooters. Extraction shooters like Escape from Tarkov very much have elements of survival shooters in them. And roguelikes, well, imagine Destiny content where you start as one of the characters from one of these spin-off games, and just like how in a roguelike you get different abilities and powers as you play and advance, all that work that they put into skills and abilities, well, you could put that into a bite-sized environment to function in. One of the reasons I love Gunfire Reborn is it reminds me of Borderlands, but I get the experience in a very short play session. The bombast of crazy guns and abilities sort of shrunk down into a smaller gameplay experience. And we know that Destiny has always struggled to make their PvP a big draw for new players and even long-standing players. The vast majority of the player base has always centered around the PvE. Well, a lot of what they built and developed for Marathon could be a good middle ground. Although Gambit was their attempt at PvEVP content, and it never seemed to garner large amounts of engagement compared to the rest of the game. In any case, we know Bungie is great at building shooters, so it would be a shame if either of the following scenarios played out. Scenario 1 is that what I've predicted will happen. They'll launch the game, it'll fail to garner enough interest and a big enough player funnel, and it will flop similarly to Concord. That's a lot of time, a lot of talent and effort completely wasted. Scenario 2 is that both Bungie and Sony agreed that the game should be canceled, but then they just scrap all of the work. I think the best case scenario is to repurpose the work, especially since Bungie is quite literally telling their player base that the medium-sized expansions will not be traditional Destiny content structure. If you start putting roguelike content or Metroidvania-type content into Destiny, I can't see why a class of heroes for an extraction shooter couldn't somehow be repurposed as well. All of that to say this: if the fans aren't confident in Marathon and Bungie isn't confident in Marathon, I can't see PlayStation being confident in Marathon either. So I think PlayStation should push to cancel it if they haven't already. And with the clear indicators that bandwidth and staff have been shifted around already, and Bungie quickly went from we aren't doing annual expansions to we're going to do 2 medium expansions a year, well, Marathon may already have been canceled, and the company may have changed course to an all-hands-on-deck approach for their most profitable piece of property, Destiny. So, where does that leave us? I honestly think Marathon has already been canceled, and if it isn't, the likelihood of canceling it has probably increased in the wake of everything that has transpired. The game has just too much stink on it. The former director controversy, the change in direction, the internal feelings about the game, two different insiders claiming to have basically heard that the game is a lost cause, and now a game with heroes, made in part by former Bungie developers, was completely shut down after only 2 weeks. Player funnel dependent games are incredibly risky, and Marathon currently has practically the entire deck stacked against it. The market is saturated. The market is resistant to new live service games. The market just watched a PlayStation live service game flop terribly, and that's just the external realities of the market itself. I would bet that internally, the morale and the confidence surrounding the game is lower than it's ever been. Even if the worst case scenarios play out and the game launches and flops, or they cancel the game and they use nothing from it, at least redirect the talent and the bandwidth towards something that actually makes the company money. I get it. We want companies to take risks. We want them to branch out and do new things. But it's clear some of these games, some of these ideas, they were born too long ago, and they're coming to a market that will not be receptive to them. I've had a lot of people ask me, why are you so confident that Fair Games and Marathon should be canceled? I'm confident because if you look at how the market is receiving these types of games, it is very, very difficult. You either seemingly have like overnight funnel success because you have an established fan base or established trust, like with Riot and Valorant, and now Valve and Deadlock, but I don't see Bungie having that confidence from the market for a game like Marathon. I certainly don't see PlayStation having the confidence from the market right now for either Marathon or Fair Games. I know some people will push back and say, but Marathon really isn't a PlayStation game. Well, it's attached to the PlayStation brand because it's attached to Bungie. And I think at this point in time, reassessing those plans and redirecting your talent is a far better use of your resources. But those are just my thoughts, and now it's time to hear your thoughts. And you can do that in a comment below, or come to the live stream, which will be in a card that hits right here, and then we pin it in a comment below as well. And if you like this content and you want more like it, please remember to like, share, and subscribe.